All right, Adam, let's get into our power rankings. Coaching vacancies right now. We've talked about the Mavericks. That's one. Celtics, that's another one. Wizards, Pacers, Blazers, Magic, Pelicans. That's 7 coaching vacancies. And then we're gonna do the half. We're gonna do put the Bucks in parentheses because if they don't win this game 7, it seems like Bud is on his way out. But we'll just do the 7 for now. Let's start with what's the worst one. Let's go backwards. What do you
Worst?
think?
Okay.
Yeah, what's the worst coaching vacancy right now?
You just called me Adam coming out of the break, so I gotta recalibrate who I am. My worst job, I was torn between 2, but I ultimately settled on the Washington Wizards job as being the worst available head coaching opening. I think it could be a cool one. DC's cool. It's living. They have some nice young stuff. Denny Avdia, Rui Hachimura, Thomas Bryant's kind of young too. And then, of course, they have Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. Like, that's really awesome. There's also a chance that Russ isn't awesome ever again. I mean, he really came on at the end of the year and saved their season, but he started poorly 2 seasons in a row now and has really struggled for half the seasons. And Beal could demand a trade any second. I know that's been speculative for forever. He could also extend any second, and then this job looks a lot better. But that there's just so much unknown about how this job could go. And our pals Hollinger and Duncan have called it a Silas. You know, he got hired in Houston, and then immediately they just traded every vet they have, right? So now they're coaching an awful team. Like, they called this job and my second worst job that I'll talk about in a second, a high Silas potential job. So I agree with that, and I have the Wizards last.
Yeah, that one's really interesting, the Wizards job, because you do have the stars, but it's like it just seems like they're faking you out, right?
Well,
like we have stars, and yet we're this team that, you know, I'm not sure if you have the ceiling or the potential to be anything really.
They had the stars last year, and they had to go on this crazy April-May run to get into the play-in tournament just to get the 8 seed. Like, is it really that awesome of a roster? And I get that that's not on the coach, but you know, it feels kind of lame duck. Like, you're gonna have pretty high expectations also, and
you get to coach Russell Westbrook.
You do, yeah. You do get to coach 2 stars, which is really cool. But yeah, Russ.
No, is that cool? Is coaching Russell Westbrook? Is that cool?
For Scott Brooks, it is. Yeah, that's a tough one. Who's your last one?
Man, this might be a hot take. I'm gonna go Blazers.
Okay, they're my second worst.
I think Blazers is the worst job because the pieces. Are they going to change that much? Are they going to really go out there and make a whole bunch of moves? Because I think we've seen the ceiling for this team. They made that Western Conference Finals once because the road was mapped out for them. But I think this Blazers team is kind of capped out, but they have expectations for going higher than what they actually can do. And so that just makes it an impossible job. Veteran players already there. You have to come in and win right away. Like, the Magic would probably be pretty high for me because you go in, there's no expectations. You have these young guys, and you're like, one of these young coaches that just gets to go in, James Borrego or whoever, just gets to go in with no expectations. But with Blazers, you have expectations, and I don't know if you have the talent or the roster to pull it off.
Yeah, they're my second lowest for similar reasons, right? The guy who comes in, they're going to expect him to do better than Terry Stotts just did. And look, like, the Blazers should have done better against the Nuggets. That's pretty well documented, but they don't have a ton of stuff they can do better. The roster is just not like, Dame is amazing, and then CJ doesn't fit that well with him, and the rest of their stuff is just like a bunch of awful defensive players, right? So they're really stuck in what they can do. I don't know how a coach can come in and make Carmelo Anthony and Enes Kanter like good defenders all of a sudden. So, it's a tough job. And to quote Hollinger and Duggan again, huge Silas potential. Like, you could come into this Blazers team, and if you lose in the first round, Dame demands a trade, and then you're coaching a terrible team in 1 year. So, yeah, I similarly have them low, the high implode potential team, and it could be awesome. Like, you could click with Dame and things could go great, but yeah, I have them pretty low as well.
Yeah, are you going to be a Rick Carlile or an Avery Johnson, right? For the Mavericks, like, Rick Carlile comes in and takes him to the title. Avery Johnson comes in, and I guess he did some good things there and should have won a title. Should we go back to that? I don't know if we need to do a revisionist history on that. So Blazers and Wizards seem to be our bottom right there. I think I'm going to put Pelicans for similar reasons. You do get you do get Zion Williamson. You have these young players, but it seems like they already have these expectations to make the playoffs. And it's like in a similar vein as the Blazers. You have these expectations to make the playoffs. I'm not sure you have the roster and the talent to get there. And then you also have to deal with this Zion family stuff where it's like Zion should leave. They don't have the right, pieces around him and all this kind of stuff. That just seems like a headache you don't want to have to deal with. And there's a lurking giant there. There's just this lurking presence of LeVar Ball. When is he going to come back? Because he's been dormant for far too long, and I'm ready for a LeVar Ball resurgence of just something. if they re-sign him and they just keep him for a long time, because then he's gonna feel established and all that. But yeah, that's a minor thing. But
I have the Pelicans job 4th. I don't know if I should have said that. I think we're just going bottom to top, and I just ruined the way we're ordering this. But
that's fine. In the middle.
I think coaching Zion has a ton of allure. And Ingram was an all-star last year under Gentry. Clearly, I don't think Stan was higher for them in the first place, so that was kind of strange to me. But that doesn't matter at this point. They have got young, cool stuff. They've got some good players under contract for a while.
Stuff.
And then I don't think the expectations will be that high. Like, they haven't made the playoffs since AD left. Like, obviously, I think they want to, or they wouldn't have fired Stan Van Gundy. For other reasons, he got let go as well. But
you don't think if they don't make the playoffs next year that coach is going to be gone too?
No way. Well, I don't think they should be.
That's what expectations are about, right? They're not necessarily rational always.
Maybe I should have them a little lower, but I just think the allure of coaching Zion for a guaranteed 3 years, right, is so high that I have to put that one up pretty high. Plus, you'll have Ingram. Kyra Lewis looked good at times last year. Jackson Hayes looked good at times last year. I'm missing a young player. Why am I missing a young player? Najee Marshall looked good at times last year. Who am I missing? I'm missing a good young player for them. But I think they've got the pieces.
Alexander Walker, did you say that?
Nikhil, that's right. Plus, they have all the picks from the Lakers and the Bucks from their 2-star trades over the past couple of years. So, like, they have the ability to retool pretty quickly. So, yeah, I have that job pretty high up and appealing.
Yeah, and I think the rest of these jobs are decently appealing, right? Like, I think that.
Yeah, I agree.
Pacers would probably be my next one. However,
okay,
you're following up something that's not too hard to follow up, right? Like,
yeah, we talked about expectations for the other jobs. It's kind of flipped for the Pacers, where like Nate Bjorkgren reset the expectations. Yeah, so the next coach has way lower expectations and honestly a decent roster that's going to be around for the next 3 years, right? So they could just walk into 3 straight playoff berths coaching that team. I have them 5th. So I'll get to my 6th team after we talk about the Pacers, but I cover that team. So I have thoughts here. Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Like, they could grow. They have 2 good young centers. They have a bunch of, again, very solid, not quite all-star, but close level guys in Brogdon and LeVert and Warren and even Turner. So if they're all back, that team is still good, right? Nate McMillan got them to the 4 seed, right? So, and Nate McMillan obviously doing very well in Atlanta. So the right coach can take that team to great heights and look really good in the right circumstances. Just has to be a good communicator. That's what they've been really lacking. So I think that can be an appealing. Honestly, I agree with you that besides the bottom 2, that all be pretty appealing jobs, and the Pacers are among that group that would be pretty appealing. And again, like a low expectation situation with a good roster because they're coming off a 34-38 season. Like, no, I think fans think they should get better and make the playoffs, but also no one is like, oh, they should be so awesome. So it's like the perfect spot to be as a coach. It's a good spot with that roster. So I have them 6th. I actually think we've glossed over a team that you mentioned earlier, and I want to bring them up.
Yeah, Pacers it seems like a perfect 4-year run. You do your 4-year run, and then you're gone after 4 years. And
when their core contracts aren't out at the same time. I have the Orlando Magic 6th, and you've kind of talked me out of that because we've been talking about expectations so much. So, like, if whoever they hire, the fan base is not going to care how good they do, right? Like, they're not supposed to be good for a while. So that is pretty appealing, and they could get 2 really good picks in this draft, plus the stuff they already have and the picks they have coming from Chicago. So that I probably should move that job up, honestly. That could be pretty appealing. But the only reason they have it lower is Jackie Vaughn or Jacques Vaughn. I forget how you say his first name. He coached the Magic right after Dwight Howard. Similar situation. No expectations. We're just building and developing these players. And they were awful. He went like 20 or 30-something and 80-something in 2 seasons. And now, every time he's trying to apply for a job as a head coach, I just see people like, oh, he's awful. Look at his record. Oh, my gosh. It's like that could matter in the future of your search for other jobs. So, like, yeah, I agree. Like Mark Daigneault now with the Thunder, it's an awesome job. There's no expectations. You just have to be a good player development coach. Same with the Magic. And I think it's a good landing spot for a lot of guys. But it's going to matter for your future jobs if you can't grow that team eventually. So there's a lot of pressure at some point. That's why I have it lower, but I understand why you'd have it higher than I do.
The only pressure is just going to come from like 15 people on Twitter being like, why aren't you playing RJ Hampton more?
Yeah.
I feel like that's where it's going to come from.
Mo Bamba needs to play more.
All right, the top 2, Celtics, Mavs.
Top 3 if you count our half team.
Oh, the Bucks. We're throwing the Bucks out of this one.
That's my top 3 though. Is the half team plus those 2 you just said.
Let's just focus on Mavs Celtics. Which one is a better deal? And I'll start with this. Mark Cuban is the wild card because whoever you are, you have an opinion about Mark Cuban, whether it's from afar or whether it's from actually dealing with him. And if you think that Mark Cuban is like a a hard owner to deal with because he's going to be meddling. He's going to want to be in all the basketball decisions. Everything's going to come down to him, and he's going to say yes or no to literally everything. Then that's not a good job for you. And so it really just comes down to the person. So for me personally, I kind of like an owner like that, to be honest, just to be like, hey, it was him it was Mark that was the one that signed off on it. And I also like owners that seem like they'll invest in things, but also the Luka over Jason Tatum, just the number one player, right? You kind of have to just go with rosters at this point. I think the Mavs would be higher than the Celtics for me, even though the Celtics get an Eastern Conference bump, which is I also gave to the Pacers over the Pelicans a little bit of an Eastern Conference bump where you're like, you're going to be in the Eastern Conference a little bit easier. So I'll put Mavs slightly over Celtics. But yeah, I think Mavericks is number one here.
So I struggled tie-breaking these two teams. I have them flipped from you, but I understand why, like vacuum situation, you'd pick the Mavs to be number one here. Like Luka is the best player. And like we said earlier, like they slightly tweak their roster, get a number two. They're like a contender for a title immediately, right away. Right.
And it's not like the Blazers because they Luka can get them there, right? Like it's just a different type of player than what the Blazers are dealing with. So I can understand why people would be like, well, what you just said this, they had the same record last year, all that.
I picked the Celtics first because I also think they'll be really good going forward. Tatum is a top 12 player, wherever you have him. He's amazing, right? He can win you playoff series. Yeah, right. He couldn't this year because Kemba was hurt and Jalen was hurt. But
I mean, but that 50-point game against the Nets was one of the most impressive things.
That was insane. That was ridiculous. Like the fact that they even won a game with the roster they had was like, oh my gosh, Tatum's that guy. But the like it's the Celtics. Like coaching the Celtics is like, oh my God, you're coaching the Celtics. That's the bump, like the 16 banner bump. That's why I put them first. That's not a good reason. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't have anything to do with the job or what you're supposed to do. And the Eastern Conference bump definitely played into my thinking when I tied them originally. That's it. Like you're coaching the effing Boston Celtics. So that's why it's number one for me. But I think that basketball situation alone, it's probably the Mavs because you're coaching potentially like a top 10 to 5 player like of all time. I mean, it's very premature to say that, but his trajectory is looking that way for Luka. So that's got to be a super appealing job.
You gave them a Brad Stevens Butler bump, right? Like you
Brad Stevens actually went to the same high school I did, so I have even more
the bias is all over.
I know I can go way down the Brad train. And I wanted him to coach my lovely Indiana Hoosiers this season too. So my Brad affinities definitely are a factor here, but they're basically the same to me. Like they're both just kick-ass jobs.
I didn't think about the whole angle of I had the job that Red Auerbach had, right? Like,
yeah, that's
like
so cool.
At a dinner party, that would be the coolest thing to say.
Yeah, I'm totally. That's like to look up again. The Mavs have championships. Like it's not crazy thing, but like if you look up in the Garden and there's or the TD Garden, the Garden sounds like but yeah, the Celtics arena, and you see all those banners. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm coaching this team and we're good. Like that's so cool. So that's why it's number one for me. But I understand the Mavs being one. And the Bucks, if it does open up, would be my number third because coaching Giannis would be also incredible. But the expectations there would be very heavy.
Why are the Bucks different than the Blazers? That's kind of something I'm just putting
because they're for sure going to be good and there's no Silas potential. Well, I guess there is Silas potential.
If they lose again.
Maybe I should lower that one. That's a good point. I don't know why I'm so secure in Giannis staying there.
I mean, he signed the extension, so he's there until they trade him, and it'd be insane for them to trade him.
Yeah, I don't think he'd demand a trade. He could, but I have them high up because coaching Giannis would be like it's like the Luka bump, right? Like he could be a top 20 player of all time, like that. You coach that guy when you can, so that's why. But I understand again why you just said they'd be lower.
There you go. Hard. Those are our power rankings. We not as powerful as the last ones that we've done in the past. Not as definitive, but there's some thoughts about coaching vacancies. Tony East, Locked On Pacers. Go follow and subscribe to the show for all the Pacers offseason. Locked On Mavs. We'll have 10 more emergency pods this week, I'm sure, to talk about stuff. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On NBA.